This episode discusses themes of deportation, family separation, and the emotional toll of growing up undocumented in the U.S. These topics may be distressing or triggering for some listeners. Please take care while listening and prioritize your mental health and emotional well-being.
For the haters, come on, do it now or later. Yeah. It don't matter what your name is, share your story, we'll be waiting. Yeah. For the haters, whoa.
Ready?
Ready.
All right. Well, welcome back to For the Haters. Today's story is about living in a country you call home, but constantly feeling like your place here is on shaky grounds. Our guest, Giselle, is a DACA recipient who lived most of her life in the U.S. after her mother brought her here at the age of 3. At 12 years old, Giselle's father was deported, forcing her to grow up fast while navigating grief, fear, and a future filled with uncertainty. Despite the immersed challenges, Giselle has turned her experiences into a mission. Working in the corporate world, as well as a behavioral interventionist for children, she is an advocate for those who haven't found their voice yet. She's here to share her story, the fear, the resilience, the heartbreak, the hope. Let's get into it.
I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to meet that girl. Oh, that's me.
Welcome, Giselle, to For the Haters.
Hey, haters.
I always like to let people know when I have friends on.
Yeah.
Because I think the dynamic's a little bit different when like I have people who are in my daily life that are on the podcast. So for those of you that are listening, Giselle is a friend of mine, IRL. We work together in our corporate jobs. But Giselle has grown to be a really important person in my life. And it's been really beautiful just getting to know her. And I'm really excited to share her story for you guys to get to know her as well.
Yeah, I'm a yapper, so I love to talk.
She does love yapping. And so we have a live studio audience today too. So
Woo! Me, laugh.
Giselle, let's talk about, where do we even want to start? Let's talk about your childhood, right? Like, let's talk about what life was like for you before you even recognized what the concept of immigration was.
Yeah, absolutely. So really, looking back, I thought that I had a normal childhood until kind of the glasses came off and everything erupted. I grew up in a 2-parent household, which I thought was the American dream. We had a home, we had a family, we had friends, everything was incredible. But my parents always really emphasized school. And I thought that was just my parents being great parents, telling me hard work, dedication, and a lot of focus on school will get you in through doors that we've never been through. I knew that my parents had immigrated from Mexico. I knew that they didn't speak English, and I saw how much that affected our everyday life, from things like me translating mortgage documents at the age of 7 to me helping my parents file their taxes at the age of 9.
Mm-hmm.
Like, things were just, I always understood that I was more mature, and the adults in my life never let me forget that I was really mature for a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And my purpose in life now is to let kids know that they deserve to be kids. Being mature is not a compliment, and it's actually mostly rooted in trauma and fear and the lack of safety that you feel that you need to take into your own hands.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a younger brother as well. My brother is 5 years younger than me, so he's currently 23, but I felt like I was a third parent to him. So that affected our relationship a lot, and we've thankfully grown to rebuild that. But a lot of things I was exposed to and he was sheltered from, which really made me recognize that I was different. And there was a clear, distinct line that differenced me and my brother. What I didn't know is that it was an invisible line that goes through and divides the United States and Mexico. My brother was born on one side of the line and I was born in another. And that has really affected the way that we have both been able to grow up and the opportunities that it's given him and the ones that I've had to really fight for.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to just take a couple steps back too, right? Like, can you just explain how you got here, right?
Yeah.
What that experience was like that you know of? I know that you were 3, so the memories aren't really there.
Yeah.
So the conversations you've had with your mom, you know, what landed you here
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
Iowa, out of all places?
In Iowa, right? Really, I make a joke now that I live in the New York of the Midwest because I'm like, Mom, what were we thinking? But what my mom was thinking was that Iowa was an agricultural hub. My father actually got a work visa to travel to Iowa and be an immigrant worker. So this was a time where the U.S. government was okay with, now in my mind, exploiting immigrants to come here to work for a lower wage than naturalized citizens were working for. And it helped the United States economy. And it also helped Mexican immigrants, right? So my father left Mexico City, which was at the time, if I was born in 96, my dad would have come right around then. But he left my mom back in Mexico City because my mom was pregnant. So for those of you who don't know, the extensive immigration system, there's a lot of things that could negatively impact someone's admission into the United States. My mom was pregnant at the time, and so she was denied entrance. So my mom had to go through her pregnancy, have a child. She was a single mom, essentially on the other side of a country, and eventually enough was enough. And she had to make a really big decision of continuing to wait out this extensive process that my father had waited 20 plus years for to possibly reunite with my biological father, or making the really scary and unsafe choice that was illegal at the moment to cross into a country that she didn't know and learn a language that she didn't understand in hopes of reuniting with my dad. Mm-hmm. And looking back, I think a lot of times it's really easy to put the name, criminal. My mom committed a crime. Absolutely. But if you've ever run a red light, if you've ever not come to a complete stop at a stop sign, so have you. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times, my issue with people seeing my mom as a criminal is how many crimes have any of us committed, whether it's going 5 miles over the limit, that could have really made a big impact in your life. So I do not blame my mom. In fact, it was really hard for me to even sign paperwork when I got my DACA status saying I acknowledge that my mom committed a crime, mm-hmm. and I now have to suffer the consequences. I don't feel like I'm suffering. My mom gave up her entire life at the age of 28 to give me the opportunity to have a better one. And my mom is my hero.
Yeah.
So.
And how did your mom, find a way to bring you here?
Yeah. So in Mexico, there are people called coyotes or coyotes, and their sole job is to transport people safely in a very unsafe terrain to the United States. Some coyotes will get you as close as they can. Some will genuinely get you into the United States. And of course, this all comes at a different rate. Mm-hmm. And this is just another situation where people's livelihoods and the amount of money that my mom gave up to bring us here, she paid to go through a nightmare. She paid to get 3 days and 3 nights of just insufferable terrain. And I can't even imagine the type of love you have to have for someone to want to do that.
Mm-hmm. And I know we've talked about this before, but like there was people that were with her that didn't survive that journey, right? Like it's not Absolutely. Like a simple experience, or it's not like a given experience of getting here with safety. Like there's troubles that happen throughout that entire trip.
Yeah. And what people don't understand is you're on your own. Yeah, you're in a group of people to try and make it as safe as possible. And of course, the coyotes get more money if you have a bigger group. Mm-hmm. However, not only are you running a more dangerous journey, having more people that are more visible, but you also, my mom was one of the only women with a child on that trip. She tells me all the time, she won't go into a lot of details. I know it's really traumatizing, and it was 25 years ago, but I don't think there can be enough time to be ready to talk about that. But she talks about how people would offer her water and food, not for her, but for me. And the amount of, I think, understanding of the sacrifice that it was doesn't resonate with people until you've been in a situation where you have to give up your food for your own children. And so the fact that other men and women were doing this for me, and they didn't never met me, they just understood the sacrifice my mom was giving by even attempting the trip. Because it's not a for sure. The coyote does not have to wait for you. If you cannot keep up with the group, you're done. You're on wherever you are.
Yeah. Yeah. So your mom gets here and she makes her way to Iowa to meet with your dad. And they live, they start living this life of just working and contributing to society. And you start growing up in this, new culture that you're split between two sides. Yet, we've talked about this, but like you grow up with rules in place of, if this happens, to do X, Y, Z. Can you kind of tell, shed some light just of those rules that you were given, the fear that was like put into you for every single day?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was growing up, so when we first got to Iowa, we were blessed to be able to stay with my aunt and my uncle, my mom, or my dad's biological sister, and her husband and their family. And they were the ones who really got us introduced and acclimated into Iowa or American culture. And it's really interesting, and I do genuinely think the experience would have been different had it not been in Iowa. When people think of Iowa, they think Midwest, they think Midwest nice, and that's truly what it always was for me. People will smile and be welcoming regardless of how they genuinely feel, because that's the Midwest way. So I grew up and I had lots of friends in the cul-de-sac that my aunt and uncle lived in. My aunt and uncle were very established before we were. So in my mind, they were living the American dream and we were coming in. They were housing us for a moment until we could get on our feet. What people don't realize is when you come into the country and you don't know the language, no matter how smart you are, no matter how much of a hard worker you are, there are hurdles that you will never be able to overcome. So although my dad had already been here for 2 years prior, because remember my dad came over when my mom was pregnant, he was still learning the language. He only knew agricultural terms, factory terms. And my mom didn't work for my first few years of life until I went to preschool. Learning to speak any language is hard as a kid. Learning to speak English at school and Spanish at home was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, because nobody understood me. This wasn't a progressive enough time where schools had interpreters or teachers who spoke multiple languages. So this would have been like 2021, 2022 in Iowa, and they didn't have ELL. They didn't, that programming.
2001.
Yeah.
You said 2021.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this would have been like 2001, and they didn't have ELL classes yet, at least not for preschool and kindergarteners. So my first 2 years of schooling, I always joke, were probably the quietest I'd ever been for a teacher. But that was because nobody understood what I was saying. I was speaking in Spanglish, because I was learning words at home in Spanish and words at school in English. And my mom said only Spanish at home, and my teachers would say only English at school. So I spent like 2 years just mute, not talking, because I was so frustrated. But what people don't understand is for 2 years, I didn't tell anybody how I felt. I didn't talk about my needs. I didn't talk about the struggle of being in a school where nobody else looks like you, and then being told consistently, like, you speak like an alien. You speak like a foreigner. You don't belong here. So those thoughts and that messaging was ingrained in me from the age of 4 or 5. Yeah. And it's just something that has always been there. Other rules as I got older, we don't talk about our family. We don't talk about where we live. We don't talk about where we're from. If somebody invites you to spend the night, you don't, because we don't. Nobody can come over here. You can't go over there. And that was how it was for a long time. I would say until my brother was born, who's 5 years younger than me. And my parents kind of loosened up a bit more. They started to get acclimated to the way of life in Iowa. We made more friends. And we really created the community that we always wished we had, with other immigrants who were in Iowa who were living the same kind of isolated experience. Yeah. There were other immigrants in Iowa who were living the same isolated experience, who oftentimes found themselves working in the same restaurants that my mom and dad were working, for cash under the table, because that's the only way you got paid.
You obviously knew what the authorities were from a young age. You were taught whether it was not to talk to them or not to tell them where you lived. It was very top of mind always. That.
Yeah, absolutely. So something that a lot of people don't understand is that my community has a really big fear of law enforcement. Now, you could be a mall cop, you could be a police officer, you could be a part of the FBI. We see a uniform and we know to be quiet. We know to look down. We know to look away. My entire childhood was spent trying to get me to be smaller, be quieter, say less. And for the people that know me in my everyday life, I am not small, not quiet, and I cannot be contained. So thinking back a lot, I think of how hard my childhood was because I was such an opinionated little girl and I had so many creative ideas. But my parents would say, like, if I came home and I said, hey, I get to be the lead in my play, my dad was like, that's too much. You should actually ask to be a supporting character. I'd come home and I would say, hey, I got asked to give a speech at this, rally. And my parents would say, no, you can't do that. It was their fear of people looking at me and immediately just recognizing, well, she doesn't belong. She doesn't look like anyone else. There's something there. My parents always really emphasize as well that I shouldn't aim to be the smartest person in the room. I should aim to be the smartest brown person in the room. And that always felt wrong to me, but my parents really emphasized not too much attention. Enough, but not a lot.
Yeah.
And so it always made me feel like I wasn't reaching my full potential. And also, as an oppositional defiant child, I was like, you tell me be quiet, I want to yell.
Yeah.
I want to scream. So I felt like I was trapped inside of my own body. And I didn't know why my parents were saying these things because up until the age of 12, I had no idea I was undocumented.
Yeah. And so like I'm sitting here thinking like they're trying to protect your family because the more limelight that comes to you, it comes to the entire family. And they're just trying to keep this quiet life that they've created, which is hard, right? Like at least in that time, I guess there's no lack of social media or lack of that kind of attention. But in a town like that, you have eyes kind of all over the place.
Absolutely. I would say growing up in Des Moines was the best thing that could have happened out of growing up anywhere in Iowa because my parents still understood the fact that if we lived in a rural town, there would be a lot more people that looked like us, but we would all be suffering the same struggles.
Yeah.
And so while my parents thought that would be comforting, they wanted more. They knew that life in a city with more opportunities was always going to be, yes, more dangerous, but also more bountiful in terms of the opportunities and the jobs that my parents had to create their own jobs. They had to approach people and say, can I clean your house? Can I mow your lawn? Because one of the things that my parents always emphasized was, my mom committed a crime by bringing me into the country. My dad committed a crime by overstaying his stay. And they don't deny that. They understand that. But they vowed to never continue to commit more crimes to live the lifestyle they did. So while, they worked for cash under the table, and that was a crime for the owners of the establishments, my parents never took a fake social security number. They never wanted to impersonate anyone else. They understood the risks of it and they understood how it could be more lucrative in the immediate. But my mom always said that the guilt of having done one thing in her life that she shouldn't have done was enough to get her through the end.
As you grow up, you start living what you feel like is a normal life or what you understand. When is it that you start to know that when do you find out that you are undocumented? Is that when your dad gets deported? And what was that experience like for you?
When I was 12, I would have been in the 7th grade, and both of my parents worked multiple jobs. So I knew at any moment I could come home and my parents would not be there. That was normal. However, coming home to my dad being there, that was not normal. So I came home after school one day and my dad was home. Didn't really understand what was going on, but I could tell that he was worried. He was upset about something. And I also knew to avoid my parents when they were upset. So I went off into my room, And I heard commotion, and my dad was removed from our house by immigration. And it was a moment that I had always been prepared for, although I didn't know that I was being prepared. So my dad was taken. My brother was not home yet. My younger brother, so if I was 12, he would have been 7. And my immediate thought was the safety plan. And I thought every family had a safety plan. And it turns out, a lot of them do. If you come home and you get hurt, you go to your neighbors, you call the emergency numbers. My safety plan was a lot more intense. My safety plan included calling a lot of adults, explaining how many cops were there, explaining what they looked like, explaining what my dad was wearing, talking through where my brother and my mom were, because what I didn't understand is that my mom had a very different safety plan. My mom's safety plan was hide. My safety plan was find an adult, find any adult that we trust and let them know. And so my adult was my neighbor Candy. And Candy was as sweet as her name is. She understood and knew my parents and my family situation. And so at this point, we lived in our own house. We had what I would say was our version of the American dream, right? We had a wraparound fence, we had a yard, we had a playground, we had a 2-car garage. Like, that was everything that my parents had ever worked for. And to see it be removed, and then to have to be the adult to make all the choices for, the few days that my mom didn't feel safe enough to come home. And now that I'm older, I think a lot about how she must have felt in her mid-30s hiding. And I also know that her main concern was me. Because my younger brother, he was a citizen. He could have gone and stayed with any of our family. But my mom understood that I was undocumented as well. And so it was hard for her to be stuck in a position where she couldn't make a lot of moves quickly. And that was the first time that I would say, like, I had a real panic attack. And my friends and my family and everyone in my really close life understands that. Well, I understand the trauma and the PTSD, and now working in the mental health space part-time, I get it. It still doesn't take away the fact that the moment that I get pulled over, the moment that I see flashing lights, the moment that I see a mall cop, my body freezes, and I'm 12 years old again. And I'm looking for a safety plan. I don't know where my brother is. And so I think one of the things that I've had to really work on is explaining to people that my perspective is and my views and some of the things that I say when I talk about my feelings towards law enforcement or towards police or towards authority in general, it is not in a malicious way. It is not me over not looking at the fact that they are doing a job that is very important to me and my community. And being an adult, I understand that. It doesn't help the fact that I can't control the way my body feels sometimes. And so therapy for 6 years has definitely helped. My therapist is an angel. And I've been able to find also that there are temporary fixes for some of those things. So when I finally admitted to my therapist that the last 4 times I've been pulled over where, for whatever reason, the cop always assumes I'm drunk. And it's because the police, at least in Iowa, don't have the adequate mental health training that they need to understand she's having an anxiety attack, she's having a panic attack. So immediately I become a threat to them, and they don't even know they've been a threat for the last 16 years of my life. Mm-hmm. And so there are things that I've been able to do, like I have a medical card now that says if I'm unresponsive or I'm not following directions, I'm not trying to not comply. So please don't use deadly force. It's something that things as much as like my friends speeding when I'm in a car with them, they don't think about that. But anytime I'm pulled over with a friend, they've asked for my ID as well. And my friends always look at me and they're like, I never get passengers asked for like, that's weird. And I'm like, that's my life. I'm used to it. So I've learned that people in my life have very different lived experiences than me. And even though they understand or try to empathize, they never will. They'll never get it. And I don't want them to either. My lived experiences have been ones that I wouldn't want to be able to share or empathize with somebody else fully because it's hard.
A lot of thoughts, a lot of feelings, a lot of everything. Still at this point, this happens when you're 12, right? So all of this has stemmed from this 12-year-old you, which is, you know, you haven't seen your dad. That's the last time that you saw your dad was at that point in life because, you know, you're undocumented. You can't leave this country without having issues to come back in. When DACA comes later, but what is that leading up to that decision of like applying for DACA? And, you know, you just have to go back to normal life after.
Yeah. So the age of 12 was a big year, right? I found my dad was deported. My mom was left with all of the financial responsibility and strain. I learned that I was undocumented. I learned that the programs that I had been in for the last 2 years of middle school that were geared towards getting low-income children into a 4-year state school, those were gone because you have to be a citizen or a resident for that. And I was none. So for the next 4 years, I was truly in just an in-between. I was hiding. But what that meant for me was with my dad being gone, my dad was definitely the biggest one who would say, you have to be quieter. You have to do less. You're doing a lot. You're being too special. Like reel it in. And now with my mom working 3 to 4 jobs, I had a little more liberty. So and by that, I mean, I had to join some clubs after school. I was in the theater club, the reading club, the yearbook club, but it really led into me seeing that what I needed was community. What I needed was people who could see me for Giselle and not for whatever I was when I was with my family with all that baggage. So I got really close to a lot of my teachers and I got really close to a lot of mentors. I started going to the Boys and Girls Club after school. I joined sports. I kept busy. I don't think there was a day where I didn't have an extracurricular activity because in my mind, the last place I wanted to be was home because home made it feel real. It made it feel like my mom wasn't coming home that night. I had to always put myself and put my brother to sleep. My mom would come home middle of the night, sleep for a few hours, and then be up and out the door again before I left. And I resented her for a long time for that. And now that I'm older, I'm so sad that I did because she sacrificed even more to keep my life as normal as possible. We could have left. We could have followed my dad. But my dad was actually, he did stay in jail for about 1.5 years trying to fight it, trying to, prove that we had been here for a certain amount of time and this was our life and I'd grown up here and we had a U.S. citizen who was born here. My younger brother was a citizen. And so trying to explain all of that and it wasn't enough. And so actually one of the last visions I have of my dad is him being taken away in his shackles and his orange jumpsuit. And I think that was the moment I realized, like, this country really hates us. And that could be me. That could be my mom. And I feel like a lot of little girls are closer with their mom than they are with their dad. And so thinking of the possibility that my mom was next was terrifying. And that's never gone away.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, you're still just living, like, always just used to that state of fear of.
Yeah. So when I was 16 was when Obama passed the Dreamer Act, and it gave the opportunity for children who were brought here illegally but against their will or without the ability to say no. They were given opportunities that essentially they would have never had. The first one being a social security number. And most people are like, it's not that important.
Yeah.
I couldn't get my driver's license. I couldn't work. I couldn't do anything without a social security number.
At least in a legal way.
Yeah, in a legal way. And my mom was always so strict with that unless it was cash, we were not working. We weren't working because we didn't want to take opportunities away from other people. And now that is the main thing that people say, that my people take opportunities away from other people. And so I realized at one point I could never win. I'm going to lose regardless. So if I'm going to lose regardless, I'm going to lose in my own way. So I told my mom, like, I'm done being quiet. When I found out about the DACA bill that was being signed, and so DACA, DACA, stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Me and my mom talked about it, and my mom was terrified. She's like, you want to willingly give away our address, your fingerprints, your biometrics, your DNA to the government to possibly be allowed to stay, to reapply every 18 months and continue to pay money to a country that doesn't want you here? And I was like, yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be. The United States is my only home. I don't know. I've never been able to go back to Mexico, which is a whole other heartbreak in itself. Yeah. But getting my mom to allow me to apply for DACA and then applying for DACA, paying for DACA, while a lot of people were upset that another way for the United States to get, I did not care. I wanted so hard to live a normal life, and DACA was the first step to that. And my life did truly change after I received my DACA status and I got my social security number.
In saying that, after you receive your DACA, you, like, a couple doors open for you, right? Like, opportunities open for you because you no longer really have to stay as quiet as you were. You still have to be fearful because obviously your mom is still undocumented. Your life has just always been surrounded by other people who are also in that situation. But with school, right? You're 16 when this happens, and then you're thinking about, can I go to college? Is that even possible for me to further my education? What kind of opportunities did that lead to, and like, how did you make those next choices?
Yeah, well, my first thing, I got a job, like a real job that paid me a real livable wage for a 16-year-old, and I was able to contribute to my family. I was able to actually help my mom pay for some bills. I was able to support myself, which I understand. At 16, you should not have to do. But the ability to fund my own things meant I was not asking my mom for things, and it felt like I was removing a burden from her, and that was all I wanted. So then came the conversations about schooling. My parents always said, the one thing that no one can take away from you is your knowledge and is the ability to learn, your education. And that was why my parents originally came to the United States. So I took school very seriously. I was an AP scholar. I graduated with my associate's degree in wind turbine management, graduated high school with that because I was taking college classes. And I really thought for the longest time that I was going to go into environmental engineering and work on wind turbines and soybean natural energy, and looking at me now and looking at what I do. What a 180. Yeah. Also, I'm scared of heights, so I would not be on a wind turbine. So I don't know what I was thinking, right? But I just thought I've always been the same way. I can't say no to things.
Yeah.
Someone gives me an opportunity, I have to take it. You never know what you don't know. And so graduating high school, I was really nervous and not worried about who I'm going to prom with, who's going to win homecoming queen, who's winning valedictorian. I was worried about what's going to happen when I'm 18. And do I have to get a regular job? Can I go to school? Being told by state institutions that I'd have to pay an international student fee was a really big heartbreak because it just solidified the fact that people still had this belief that I was not an Iowan. I was not an American. I wasn't from here. And it was just another reminder every few years. It almost felt like just a twisting of the knife. Like, hey, sorry that you've been through everything. Also, let me take away this other opportunity. But my mom was never a quitter. And my mom always told me, when a door slams in your face, you better build another one. And I started looking at private schools, although I knew in my heart I could not afford it. My parents couldn't afford it, because being on DACA, something that a lot of people don't understand or is a misconception, is we don't qualify for any federal or state funding. So FAFSA, no. Grants, no. Any sort of private loan, no. I couldn't get a state loan, a federal loan. I could not get anything. I didn't have a credit score. My mom didn't have a credit score. We were working on building something from nothing, from negative ground zero. And it still didn't matter to me. I was like, how cool is it going to be when I get to tell people that I did that? And so I always knew I'd figure it out. I'd figure it, because my mom had made it this far with much less. I could not. And my mom has always said that. She's like, if I did it only knowing Spanish, you can do it. And so she's always been my biggest supporter, the person to push me and challenge me the most. But visiting my first private school was the first time that I was like, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. It seems too out of my comfort, walking around campuses where I saw no representation of me, of any really woman of color. I'm also not a small girl. So there were so many things always going through my mind. Nobody ever physically looked like me. Nobody ever had experiences like mine. So I've always felt really alone in that aspect. And only having my mom and my younger brother growing up made it feel like I was in a circle or like a bubble, and I was trapped, and I couldn't go outside of that, 3-person circle that I had built to ask for help. And I wish I could go back and tell myself that that's so wrong. That community is whatever you make of it. And if you don't have a community, build one.
Yeah. So many changes happen over that time. I'm curious of what do relationships with your brother look like, and what, like, as you get older? And I know that you said there's just some resentment, right? Like, he gets to live this different life than you do. And so you're making these choices of figuring out how you can become more solid and just stable in your living experience. What does that relationship look like between the two of you?
Yeah. I regret a lot of the things that I did growing up with my brother, because I took my anger and my frustration and the lack of answers that I had out on him, in forms of, I didn't let him be a kid either. I didn't let him mess up. In my mind, he couldn't mess up because he had 3 parents, not 2, not 1. And so I never allowed my brother to fail. And that caused a lot of tension between us when he did fail the first time, when he did fall the first time. When I went off to college and I was 18, my brother was 13 and going through some of the biggest changes in his life. He needed a male father figure. And I knew I couldn't help him with that. So I just kind of abandoned ship. And I was like, I was selfish for the first time in my life for 4 years. And I said, this is the only time I'll ever be able to feel like a normal kid. I'm going to take it. I'm going to live the college experience that I've always dreamt of, that I've always seen. And I did, and I don't regret that. I do regret not asking more adults to come together and support my brother in my absence.
Yeah.
I also, looking back, I'm like, I shouldn't have had to. So it's a little back and forth. My brother now is 23, is dating the love of his life. They are incredible. And I get to witness how some of the ways that I was more gentle with him, in terms of when he did fail, I finally came back around and I was like, it's not your fault. And I started taking accountability for my mistakes at the age of, 22. And that helped him understand and kind of let go of all of the anger that he had. I mean, if I look at it, me and my brother had 2 completely different childhoods under the same roof. He was sheltered and I was not. And that made him feel like he was lied to. And looking back, I don't know if I would have rather been lied to or lived the life I did, because
It's always greener on the other side.
neither
right?
one of us is
Yeah.
happy. And I'm glad that we've made it out, and that our relationship has grown stronger because I'm able to now educate him on I'm emotionally intelligent enough now to speak to the people in my life about the things that they did years ago that really negatively impacted me.
Mm-hmm. How does that relationship with the two of you, how is it now with the absence of your father, right? Like he's been gone since you were 12. What does that look like? Is that something that's still top of mind? Is that still something you're grieving? Is that still, relevant in your life now?
Yeah, I think I'll always grieve the life I thought I was supposed to live. I'll grieve being 15 and having my quinceañera and not having a daddy-daughter dance. I think I'll always grieve not having my dad walk me down the aisle. But I think I'll grieve forever, like, the honesty and the transparency that I should have had. I look back and I don't know exactly what I would have done had I been in a situation like that. But my dad fed me a lot of fairy tales while he was gone. He would say, I'm getting all this money to get my life together to come back to you guys. And he would tell me, and it happened for a long time, right? And so I would just kind of listen and yeah, I'd feed back into it. And it wasn't until I got to college and I realized how hurtful my dad's fairy tales were actually becoming.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that I was an adult who couldn't tell the difference between the truth and a lie, who would put aside things that I knew to be true because it was talking to my little kid heart.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that I can't forgive my dad for making it harder, for not being honest. And it wasn't my mom's fault. My mom would tell me the truth. My mom always said, your dad's not coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Don't think that. Or she would say, your dad isn't financially able to support you. Whatever he's saying, don't believe it. And in my mind, I was like, well, my mom and my dad are just butting heads. They're just arguing. And now I see that my mom knew that. And
Mm-hmm.
it also was hurting her
Yeah.
to see me be deceived by my father. And so my dad's a lot older than my mom is. My mom's in her early 50s. My dad's 20 years older.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my mom was my dad's second marriage. So I have half siblings, but I don't have a great relationship with them because how can you look at another person and only see your father and see that, I've been able to talk to my half siblings and we've been able to have some cordial conversations, but also I see how their childhoods were impacted by my dad's choices. And it makes it hard to want to be a part of that life. And so I've just decided to not seek it anymore.
Yeah.
My dad is still alive. My dad still lives in Mexico. And I grieved him for so long that in my mind he's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure there's things throughout life, right? Like you are still living. And so there's going to be life that still continues to happen that just bring up questions and just bring up emotions. I'd love to kind of transition the conversation a little bit into something that we are both kind of involved in. And I know this isn't relative to your story, but I think that from our friendship, you being just this powerhouse of an advocate, you wear your heart on your sleeve. You are now a voice for so many people. We've talked about this personally so many times. Like, what does that weight feel like of always having to be the person that educates, always having to be the person that people go to for an explanation rather than just Googling it, right? We've talked about this so many times. You being in your lived experience, me being in my lived experience as a queer person, while they're completely different sides of the spectrum, and there's relativeness and nature in it.
Yeah. I'll say this. A lot of people who have heard me talk about this are going to think I'm gonna have a different answer. Because I go back and forth. When I finally found my voice, when I finally started talking about my story, I realized it's my story and I get to choose when I open my mouth and when I don't. But what I was also able to see was the amount of people who were waiting for me to speak for them. Right? My community, And by that, I mean undocumented people, not just Hispanic people, because that's a very big stereotype that people can't seem to get over.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's a story for another time. I realized that my discomfort in talking about my story was overpowered by the amount of people who wished that they could open their mouths and speak. And I started to feel like it was my responsibility to bring more eyes onto this topic. That is not to say that I do not find it so annoying when someone asks, well, what is DACA? Oh, just something that's been around for 12 years that is consistently being fought in the Supreme Court, things like that. I've been able to kind of redirect my anger and frustration and say, instead of creating another person who is uneducated or letting them walk away without understanding my story, I could create an ally in this moment, depending on how this conversation goes, depending on how my attitude is towards them. They could either be another person fighting my fight with me, or I could have just made another person continue the rhetoric that immigrants are not welcome, things like that. So while it is really hard sometimes to answer the very basic questions, I find it to be an honor to continue to tell my story and to talk about people. And I also remind people, this is my story. I don't know what the other immigrant family from around the block who also has the same, family style as me, what they've experienced. And that actually brings up a really good point that even within our community, there's privilege. I have the privilege to be able to go out and, yes, still scared, be able to speak, be able to be a voice and share my story. There's other people who don't feel comfortable walking to the corner store because they look and they sound and they don't different than the people around them. And so I've just started to put aside the small bits of discomfort or annoyance and say, if this is my role, if this is my purpose, finding purpose in it has really helped me say, all right, I'm not as upset anymore. Now I'm kind of wondering, why do you not know? And how many people in your life don't know? So I'm going to share my story with you. I want you to, I'll make sure that you understand enough. And then I'm going to challenge you to go share it with 3 more people. And then challenge those people to share it with 3 more people.
Yeah.
And that's the only way that people really feel tied to immigration or LGBTQIA issues. You don't get it until you know someone who's going through it. And then it becomes personal.
Yeah.
So if I have to get to know every person in the world,
Every single person
I'm on my way.
Call me
World tour.
Talking about purpose, you found a sense of family and community as well in what you do outside of your day-to-day corporate girly job. Do you feel as if you see yourself in the children that you help, and that's what kind of fuels that passion to continue to do that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I kind of fell into the role of being a behavioral interventionist, and I get to work with kids every day who don't feel like they have the ability to be a kid. And I get to, for a few hours a week, give them that back. It's not always easy dealing with kids who have seen so much. And then I remember that so did I. And so part of it is asking myself, what did I need when I was 12 and scared? What did I need when I was 14 and mad? What did I need when I was 16 and excited? And asking my kids, and the amount of them that just say they want to be able to talk without being interrupted. They want to be able to bring their troubles to someone without them being minimized. And I understand as an adult in this world how hard it is to be able to put aside your everyday struggles and listen to your kiddos. I just need parents to remember that kids didn't ask to be brought into the world. And it's our purpose to make sure that the world, that their bubble that they're living in, is what they need to be able to become the best people tomorrow. And I work with a lot of foster kids, and I worked with a lot of displaced families. And a lot of them are so much richer than I could ever be because their parents care and their parents understand that the situation that they're currently in isn't great, but they're all working on it. And I think I just didn't have the transparency as a kid. And it was because my parents were trying to protect me. But really, it just left a lot more unanswered questions.
Mhm.
So I think what I try to remind adults is kids know, kids understand, whether you want them to or not. So when you're having a bad day, it's okay to tell your kid, hey, I'm having a bad day. So my reactions might be a little different today. It will, in the end, change your child's view on who you are, and it will allow them to also have bad days.
Mhm.
It opens them up to know adults are not perfect, parents aren't perfect, but your kids do think you are.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How do you stay grounded, right? Like emotionally, like for yourself, because obviously you're an emotional person, like
Yeah.
aren't we all? And so, and so how do you protect yourself, right? Like how do you allow yourself to not try to fix everything? How do you allow yourself to be involved with these kids knowing that you aren't going to be able to save every single one of them?
It's hard. And I don't think I cared to find a way to ground myself until. So I've been working with youth in my city since I was in college because I worked at a Boys and Girls Club. And I think that
Mhm.
that was the first time that I saw how kind of the pipeline from troubled teenager to really troubled adult to addict or incarcerated goes. And so the first time that I really felt myself snap was when I was in my early 20s, and I found out a kiddo that I had worked with when they were in middle school had passed away.
Mhm.
And my first thought, of course, is always, I should have done more. I should have known. I should have seen. And that is what every teacher, every parent, every community member feels. And it means we care. So the first thing for me, therapy. Oh my gosh, my therapist is my best friend. She doesn't know it. Hi, Heidi. But I love her to the point where she told me she was trying to graduate me from therapy, and I told her I have abandonment issues and she can't. But writing things through,
Shout out Heidi.
Shout out Heidi. AH dog. I would say my longest, healthiest relationship was with her. Almost 6 years, going strong. But this is something that a lot of people don't get either. I didn't have access to healthcare until I was 22.
Yeah.
I didn't have access to a dentist until I was 22. These cost me a few grand, okay? Just kidding. But I was the kid that benefited from the dentist doing a mobile bus for
Yeah.
low income areas. The eye doctors coming around and doing free eye exams. Those things that people are like, that's a waste. They directly impacted me. So I would say the way that I stay grounded is by surrounding myself with people who fully understand the amount of passion and purpose that I find in my job, but still value me more.
Mm-hmm.
So I have friends, both corporate friends, nonprofit, for every kind. I'll look at them and be like, I need you to pull me out. I need you to one. And this past winter was another time where I lost a kiddo, and it was a medical condition, but I worked with her for 4.5 years. She was supposed to graduate high school this year. She had made the most improvement in a kid because I had consistently seen her meeting her at 13 and saying goodbye 17 was such an experience, but also where I thought that would break me and be kind of like my turning point of like, I can't do this anymore. Going to her funeral and seeing the amount of kids that she had met through our program be there made it a full circle moment. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing still. I do think that eventually, if and when I decide to have my own kids or I decide to foster or adopt, there might be a time where I need to walk away. But for right now, I'm needed more than I am worried about being saved or okay. So yeah, it's a lot. But right now it's still manageable.
A lot. Everything is
a lot.
It's you know, it's conversations like this that are like super eye-opening to the weight that other people are carrying, right? Like a lot of us live our day-to-day life in the simplicity and comfort of a singular lane, which is it and it's not any shade or not any, you know, that is just the way that some people live, and that's okay that they live their life like that. But conversations like this just show the complexities of life that people are going through. And so when we open our minds and open our worlds to other people to learn and to just maybe walk in their shoes for a singular day or a singular moment, we just allow ourselves to be a little bit more empathetic to other people in general. How do you still find hope, right? Like, what does hope look like for you from now, not past, from now, with all the uncertainties of just this country, of the uncertainties of DACA, uncertainties of everything? Like, how do you still find hope to continue?
I think something that brings me a lot of peace is knowing that you also don't know what'll happen tomorrow. You don't know what'll happen a year from now. You don't know what'll happen. None of us do, right? Yes, there's layers to mine. Yes, there's legal issues. Yes, depending on who is in office, definitely affects my livelihood and how safe I feel. I've also realized that there are things that I can control and things that I can't. The only thing that brings me hope is controlling the chaos that I create. And so that might mean, yeah, I don't know what will happen in a year from now, but I do know that my 5th grade girls will be 6th grade girls. And I do know that I am going to work on a year of instilling confidence and voice into them because they have no reason to be quiet. I'm raising tomorrow's loud women, and I am so excited. My kids also fully understand my situation. My thought is a kid is intelligent enough, whether you understand it or not, to be empathetic. Kids can learn empathy from the age of 3 if it's taught, but if it's not, they never will. What brings me hope is knowing that we're all living our own experience in our own lane and none of us can see past what's directly in front of us. And I think just the possibility of having a normal life, but also, what does that mean? What does normal mean to me? What does normal mean to you? Every one of us has a different idea of what our perfect life is. My perfect life is just being treated like the person that I am, which is a really loving and really caring, passionate advocate for community, for hope, for love, and for the fact that every human being deserves dignity, no matter what they look like, no matter where they're from, no matter what they have in their pocket. We all deserve basic human rights. Snaps and claps to the audience. Thank you.
What do you wish, you know, and hope? Obviously, there's different kinds of people listening, and the reach that this might have might be one person, might be thousands of people. But what is one thing that you wish that people would take from this episode?
I really hope that people just try and put themselves in a different person's shoes. I think that your podcast perfectly captures our inability to even imagine. How often do we say, I can't even imagine what you're going through? Why can't you? Like sit in it. What makes it uncomfortable for us to have these conversations and for us to sit and listen to other people tell their stories. A lot of times, yeah, you're like, oh, I can't imagine having to grow up that way. What would happen if you did? What would happen if you took a moment and you put yourself in somebody else's position and thought about how a simple moment can impact the rest of somebody's life? Or it, it's hard. I wish empathy was a skill that could be instilled into everybody, because I think our country and our world would be a lot better because of it. But I just hope people listen with an open mind and realize that no matter how happy, no matter how funny someone is, no matter how much joy and laughter they bring into a room, there's baggage. We all have it. It's just how tightly can we compress it?
It's all there.
It's
It's
always
always there. If someone is listening and wanted to reach out to you, how could they best find you? Whether it's Instagram, whether it's email?
Yeah, so lots of different things. My Instagram is first name underscore last name, Giselle underscore Ciensen. And I have a link tree with all of my socials, all of my handles, as well as all of the other projects that I'm constantly working on. Like my girls, the kids I work with are incredible. And I want to set them up to be able to have the opportunities that they want, but I don't want them to be given to them. I want them to work for them, because that is how I was brought up. So things that we're doing this summer is I'm hosting a middle school boot camp for girls going from the 5th grade to the 6th grade. It's a big year if any of us remember it. And a lot of it is, yes, self-esteem. Yes, a lot of it is based on the friendships that they have. A lot of it is based on things out of their control. So I actually am this summer working on reaching out to different organizations that would like to help support kind of like a care package for a middle school girl. Most importantly, feminine hygiene products, healthcare type things. And also, I want my girls to see themselves reflected in other people. So whether that means I have to find them a mentor that is virtual, I will. I had my girls say, I can't be a ballerina. There's not enough Black ballerinas. So I'm like, I will find you a Black ballerina to do a session with. Like things like that. Yeah, my kid's 6. Does she really want to be a ballerina? I don't know. That's not my job. My job is to present her to a Black ballerina and let her see whatever limits you have for yourself, they can be removed. And sometimes they just need an adult that believes in them enough to start moving them for them. And I'm there.
My last question for you is, if you could talk to your younger self, what would you say to her?
I think I would tell younger me that it's not her fault. I still blame myself a lot for everything. If my mom wasn't pregnant, her life would have been different. I would tell my younger self that there's no mistake that you can't come back from, and that she will meet people who see her fully for who she is and are excited to have her around, that she's not a burden, that she's not too loud and she doesn't speak too much, that she can be creative and have all of these things and she will still find love. I think little me did not know what unconditional love was, and I work really hard to still teach myself that I'm worthy of it. And my friends and my circle and my family have gotten really good at reminding me of it. I just can't wait till the day that I don't need to be reminded that I do have a purpose and I was meant to be here. And I find it every day and I heal every day, and it's not a linear process. And I wish I had an end date for like by 35, you'll be healed and ready to go. Talking to people, it sounds like it's a forever thing. And there's always something new. Something always will come up. But I will say, surrounding myself with people who are not victims of their situation and are advocates and are championing the way, that's where I want to align myself. That's what I want to be. I will never be a victim of my situation. There's not one thing that I've experienced that I don't think I could go through again. I don't want to, but I could.
Well, Giselle, thank you so much for your honesty, your bravery, and your heart. Your story is a reminder that while paperwork can define legal status, it can never define a person's worth, dreams, and strength. To anyone listening who's navigating uncertainty, fear, or feeling like you have to carry the weight of advocacy on your shoulders, please know that you are not alone. You are more powerful than you realize. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time on For the Haters. Yo. Thanks for listening to For the Haters. Don't forget to connect with us on socials, follow, like, and share to help more people find this community. And remember, they're not alone. And if you haven't yet, join our Facebook group. We'd love to have you there. The more we grow, the more lives we can impact.
It don't matter what your name is, share your story. We'll be waiting.